Ladies and gentlemen, I just finished watching Dexter Resurrection episodes 1 and 2. Thank God they both came out together because, frankly, episode 2 wasn't one that I have a lot to talk about. It was a great episode, but I feel like it's better to just pair these together because they kind of feel like a continuation of one another. So with that out of the way, let's talk all about these episodes because I definitely have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of pros, I have a lot of cons, and I know the consensus online is that this was overall really good. And to be honest, before I get into really anything, and I have a whole list of things here on my phone as to how I felt about these two episodes, I do want to say I really did genuinely enjoy this. There were some problems, but there's problems in every show. There's problems with everything in life. So you know what? If there's pros and cons, blah, 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 I honestly think this was way better than the cons. The pros just outshined it. But you know what? I think I'm going to start with the cons and then kind of like intertwine them later as we go, just so we can nip them in the butt. So this show obviously had a pretty high expectation for Dexter fans. It had to answer a lot of the questions that fans did not like about Dexter New Blood. And frankly, I don't really think they did a stellar job about answering those questions in a way that felt, one, believable, and two, satisfying. As a matter of fact, I think what they did to Angela's character to get to the conclusions that they did was kind of insulting to Angela's character, so that was something that I certainly wasn't a fan of. And then honestly, they did the same sort of thing that they did with Dexter New Blood, where there was a lot of conveniences and contrived plot points just to get Dexter in a place. I don't personally appreciate that, and it did bother me. But I am 100% willing to kind of look past those details just so we could get to this story, because on the other hand, this story that we're getting is really interesting, and I don't think it's worth it for us or me or anyone to spend a long time talking about it. So I'm just going to quickly read through the rest of the cons that I have. I have a list on my phone, and I think I already really talked about a lot of it, but like Angela, essentially what had happened to explain away Dexter getting shot, and literally there being so many swarms of cops coming for him after Harrison shot him and he escaped and all of that stuff. Angela apparently randomly decided to backtrack and basically let Dexter know. She wrote him like a letter after she skipped town basically saying we're even, but she randomly decided to just let Dexter get away with this after Dexter had in cold blood murdered Angela's partner, and after she found out that Dexter was the Bay Harbor butcher and was adamantly against it to the point where she arrested him and called Batista. She's just randomly, for what reason, going to backtrack. That didn't make any sense. And look, I do understand they have to get to this plot point where Dexter is alive and they have to get him scot-free for the sake of the story. But like, I find it hard to believe that there was no better way to tell that than this. Does that make any sense? Again, like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to stick to this and make this like some big talking point because honestly, I understand they needed to just get Dexter alive and fix that situation, so they kind of wrote this quickly to get rid of it. But it's very hard to overlook that because a lot of people were really interested to see how they were going to get him out of this creatively, and I feel like they kind of took a lazy approach in doing that. Not the end of the world. I understand why they made that decision in the end of the day, but it did feel weird. And it also felt like a very strong regression of Angela's character, to be completely honest. Like, I feel like there was so much more they could have explored with her there, but they basically just made her go away scot-free and give Dexter give him the free reins. And no one had questions about that. I thought that was really weird. I also thought it was really weird how Dexter got out of the hospital completely scot-free to begin with after Batista, and no one chased after him. Even after Dexter stole someone's random car, and no one like reported it or anything, even if it was, I don't even know what they did to explain that. Maybe they explained it as it was the guy who died's car. I honest to God don't know what they did to explain that, but the fact that no one asked that was also ridiculous. And then the other major con for me, so again, these aren't cons that I think like ruin the show, but they are major cons in terms of the things that like are big. So the last one is Harrison. I like Harrison. I've never been one of those people that had a problem with Harrison personally. But I have a very hard time believing that he was able to get away with murder working in this hotel with security footage and just miraculously he got off by not being caught on any cameras. Yes, he works at the hotel, so yeah, in theory, he knows where the cameras are and stuff like that, but there's just no way in a New York City hotel as well known as the one that he's in would have let that slide or even give him accesses to like the kitchen, the supply closets, and all of that stuff. Usually, if you work at a job, you have accesses to certain things. You don't have accesses, you don't have the keys to the kingdom, especially if you're in a role at a job just like Harrison is. That made no sense to me. It made no sense how he could get in the people's room like that. I mean, okay, yes, I get they have a master key, but how he could get in the room, murder someone in the room, clean it up by going in the janitor closet, then go in the kitchen after hours with no one noticing him, even though he did have him on a bellhop thing or whatever the hell it was called. I just have a hard time believing that. I don't think that makes any sense. And then to butcher someone without anyone by chance accidentally coming in, whether it's security, whether it's just an employee who wanted to maybe to take a vape break and just go into a room they know didn't exist. You're telling me that he got away with that with no consequences? That made no sense to me. It really genuinely did, and it took me out of the story. I feel like that is going to be a problem with this season going forward because you're in New York City. You can't really dispose of people that easily, and it's very hard to do things quietly and sneakily here. And I'm sure it happens, but I feel like everything is just out in the open, and there's tight corners everywhere in New York City. It's not as easy to get away with things as it would be in something like Iron Lake. So those are my three big cons. But that's really it, and like I've said repeatedly at this point, those cons are outweighed by the pros, because I genuinely really liked what they did. Frankly, let's start with the easiest one. Anything with Dexter Morgan, I'm going to like. Anything with Michael C. Hall as Dexter, I am going to like. They could have him doing crazy stuff. I don't even know where I was going to go with that, but they could have him doing literally anything, and I will enjoy it and watch it, just because Michael C. Hall, I think, was born to play Dexter, and I think he does a phenomenal job with it, of being serious, of being witty, of being dramatic, of everything. He just does such a good job, so I'm going to watch anything he does. But moreover, the way it started was with just a straight up bang. It literally started immediately where New Blood left off, with him being revived in the hospital, and then from there he's in a coma for 10 weeks, and we see all of these incredible visuals of like him obviously in a coma seeing people. He sees Arthur Mitchell, who's the Trinity Killer. He sees Miguel Prado. He sees Dokes, which I thought was awesome, and we even got a little glimpse of Rita there too, even though I don't think it was actually Rita's actress there. I just think it was like just a depiction of her. But I liked all of what we got. We even got Harry and young Dexter and even young Brian. I thought all of that was great, and it just went one after the other after the other. It was like sensory overload, and I think they did a really good job with that. If you read my text review that I posted on Instagram, which, by the way, my Instagram is @jerrys.takes, be sure to go follow me because I post things exclusive there. But if you read that, you might have saw I said something about the audio in that scene being a little wonky. I'm not going to call this a con, but it was something that I noticed. The reverb, when people like Arthur Mitchell was talking with the dramatic music in the background, it made it very hard for me to hear. I was on a subway when I was watching this episode, so maybe that had something to do with it, but it was a little hard to hear Arthur's dialogue in that scene. So just wanted to point that out. That was something, but overall it didn't matter. I loved what we got with Archer. I love what we got with Arthur and him basically explaining to Dexter that you have to go through hell to achieve resurrection. I thought that was all really interesting, and then Miguel showing Dexter all of the people that have died around him, I thought was great, and it was great to see him back. And I just thought overall everything they did there was really special. I also obviously loved that Batista was back in the picture. I loved seeing him and him not holding back by asking the real questions that a lot of us need answers to. I thought that was absolutely tremendous. He was relentless there, and you could tell that is going to be more of a central point of this season, which I'm so glad about because it was the one thing that I thought was missing from Dexter New Blood. It seems like we're not going to get the manhunt right now because this is going to go for multiple seasons, as you guys know, but we are going to get a more subtle manhunt with Batista. I'm totally okay with that because let me explain. I didn't think I was going to be okay with this because I personally, you've heard me in my reviews say, I really, really, really wanted to see the manhunt of Dexter Morgan season. That was what I really genuinely wanted, and it's not what we were getting. But I'm okay with it because I like the direction that the story's going. Another big pro outside of the Batista thing, another big pro is the fact that this is set in a New York City setting. I think that is absolutely incredible because it's close to home for me. There was only one shot out of the entire 2 episodes that we saw of a place that I've never been to, and that was the York Street subway. Everywhere else was a place that I have physically been, so that's just a cool thing for me to be like, oh, I've been there. That's One World Trade. Oh, I've been there. That is the Paramount building on Avenue of Americas. Like little things like that where I'm like, oh, I've been there. I know exactly where that is. Or even like Harrison's Hotel. I know exactly where that is. I've been there. Things like that just give me a certain bond, and it's interesting to see Dexter interact in a city that never sleeps like this. I think it really works, and I think there's a lot that's going to be explored there that I really like. So Episode 1 was really good at establishing that world, bringing us back into it. It was really good at showing us these characters and even like Batista and all of that stuff. And I do think they genuinely did a good job at least giving us everything we needed to get up to speed, even though I didn't like some of the things that got us up to speed. There was nothing really, at least for me, that I felt was like left on the table. There may have been small things, and maybe I'm forgetting things just talking to the camera, but for the most part, everything we got felt satisfying to at least know where things stand. Do I agree with where they went? No, I don't, but I'm okay that we got it because now we can move the story forward. And that brings us really to episode 2, where we start to see the story settle down into where it's going. Obviously, Dexter gets, when he escapes the hospital, he goes to New York City to find Harrison, and immediately, which I thought was a little too convenient, he finds him, even though they did explain it that they'll start where the Vic died and all of that stuff. I got that, but it immediately propels us into the next story is what I'm getting at. So episode 2 is where we're starting to get this real New York City story, where there is a doppelganger of Dexter who literally goes by the Dark Passenger, killing Uber drivers. I mean, maybe they're not called Uber, but you know what I mean. And I'm glad we're setting this up where obviously Dexter is now Dexter legally again and all of that. So he finds out about this guy through the Uber drivers, and he forms a bond with the guy, and now he's on a mission to find this guy who is basically impersonating him. And I like that that is going to tie into Uma Thurman and that whole story, and I think that is a really exciting thing to set up. The one thing I forgot to mention that I think is really great, it's a strong pro to me, is the fact that they're making it realistic that Dexter was actually shot and not shying away from from showing us the recovery. Like most shows do like a speedy recovery where it's like they get shot in one episode and the next episode they're totally fine, which is absolute bullshit. But they didn't hold back at all in this episode. They made it extremely believable that he's wounded and is genuinely recovering still from his gunshot injury, even though that was at this point in the story, I think 10 weeks ago now, 11 weeks to be probably exact. I'm glad they're showing that and showing that it's not like an instantaneous thing where he's just okay. So I think they're doing a lot of good there. And I'm really, really, really excited to see where this goes. Honestly, guys, I'm just talking straight from the head. I have a lot of talking points, and there may be things I didn't exactly address so far, but if you want my TLDR, because I've been going for a little bit of time now, I really did love these 2 episodes. I thought they were great. Were they perfect? No. I think a lot of people online are saying these are like the best. Rotten Tomatoes gave these 100%, which I think is a little crazy. I think there are some contrivances that really pull it from being like perfect or even like a 10 out of 10, but I would argue it's either an 8 or 9 out of 10. If I was to give it a rating, I really thoroughly enjoyed these. There were moments in the first episode where I was like smiling at the camera, which is a little cheesy, or at the screen, like being like, holy shit, like that's sick. And there were also moments where I was like really, really invested, and there were moments where I was like, what the fuck, this doesn't make sense. So I can't say it's all good because there were some moments like that, but I gotta tell you, I'm really excited. A lot of people have said episodes 1 and 2 are the weaker of the 4 that people have already seen in their like embargo of watching the season and all of that stuff. So I'm interested to see if these are technically the weaker, what are we gonna get next? Because I think Uma Thurman's character is cool, and I think the story they're starting to set up with Harrison being a killer and Dexter going with this group is really interesting, and Batista still being in the background, probably going back to Miami to see Quinn and other people, is all cool. It's putting a lot on the table that I know we're actually going to get because Clyde Phillips always delivers. By the way, one last thing that I really liked is they brought back the New Blood intro and outro sequences with the original music. I think it works so well, and I love those title sequences in the beginning and then at the end when they play the New Blood theme, or when they play the Blood theme, and it's like those shots that are like almost like comic booky. I love it. And I really like that stylistic choice. All in all, I think you guys are going to love it if you haven't watched it already, but definitely let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you like episodes 1 and 2? And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.